The Abyss Gate. Prologue. In the depths of the 28th century, beyond the mapped territories of the Galactic empires, lay a forsaken world, Xiphos 9. A planet whispered of in lost transmissions, erased from star charts, and feared even by the most reckless of explorers. It was not the storms that kept them away, nor the choking sulfuric mist that corroded steel and bone alike. It was the silence beneath, the feeling that something watched from the void. Deep in the shadows of a sunken valley, hidden beneath miles of shifting dust, lay a city older than history itself. Its towers, carved from obsidian so dark it seemed to swallow the light, twisted into impossible angles that made the human eye ache to perceive. Symbols of unknown origin pulsed faintly upon their surfaces, veins of liquid shadow moving with a rhythm that suggested something was alive beneath the stone. At the city's center stood a monolithic structure, untouched by time, its surface smooth and reflective like a void torn into reality itself. The scholars of dead civilizations had given it a name in the lost tongues of their doomed worlds: the Abyss Gate. For centuries, the legends persisted, a silent warning buried in the myths of 1,000 fallen races. Then when a Dominion probe sent back fractured, corrupted data before vanishing entirely, the Imperium took notice. The Dominion Science Corps, blinded by ambition, dispatched an expedition to uncover the truth. Leading them was Dr. Helena Vasquez, a xenoarchaeologist whose obsession with the unknown had driven her to the edges of sanity. They did not understand what they had awakened. Chapter 1. The opening, the descent onto Xiphos 9, was an act of defiance against nature itself. The ship, the Daedalus, fought against the crushing winds and static-charged storms as it breached the planet's suffocating atmosphere. The hull groaned under the weight of the tempest's fury, every gust of wind threatening to tear them apart. The flashing bolts of violet lightning seared across the sky, each one a jagged scar against the darkness. Outside the reinforced viewport, the world below was a wasteland. Blackened stone twisted into jagged shapes, sandstorms that churned ash into the air like a ravenous beast, and scattered remnants of ancient structures, half devoured by time, or something far worse. The landing was rough, and as the Daedalus touched down on the cracked earth, it kicked up a massive cloud of choking dust that enveloped the ship in a suffocating embrace. The ship's systems faltered briefly, the power flickering as the atmosphere's magnetic field wreaked havoc on their equipment. Dr. Vasquez's breath came in short bursts inside her helmet, the thick air outside testing the limits of their suits. But she didn't pause. No, this was her life's work. This was the culmination of decades of research, and nothing would stop her from unlocking the secrets buried on this forsaken planet. "Everyone, stay sharp," she ordered, her voice crackling through the comms. "We're walking into the unknown. Stick to the plan, keep your instruments calibrated, and keep an eye on your suit readings." Her team, a mix of archaeologists, linguists, engineers, and military personnel, followed in her wake. The exosuits they wore hissed and clicked, calibrating. With the hostile environment, there was no telling what else the planet might throw at them. The storm outside raged harder as they moved deeper into the ruins, their boots crunching against the ashen ground. The structures they approached were alien in design, their outlines twisted and unnatural, as if shaped by hands that were not quite human. Towers of black stone spiraled into the air, the edges of their surfaces ragged and uneven. The distant silhouettes of what could have once been great cities were now nothing more than broken husks, swallowed by time. The city whispered to them. The wind howled, but it was not just the storm. Beneath the shrill bursts of static interference from their comms, something else lingered. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, a distant rasp that seemed to twist through the very fabric of reality. A low hum, a rhythm, like something breathing in reverse. "It's coming from the gate," Dr. Vasquez muttered under her breath, her eyes fixed ahead. The gate. That was the reason they had come, the reason they had risked everything. An ancient artifact, buried beneath centuries of sand and stone, its existence hinted at by fragmentary texts and half-mad scribblings of long-dead explorers. It had been calling to them for years, pulling at their minds from across the stars. As they approached, the temperature dropped. The air grew thick, heavy with a palpable sense of dread. Vasquez could feel the pressure building in her chest as they reached the entrance, a massive archway carved from obsidian-like stone. Symbols covered every surface, intricate patterns that shifted and glimmered, fading in and out of view as if they were alive, constantly rearranging themselves in ways that defied logic. The closer they came, the heavier the air became until it felt like an invisible weight pressing down on their skulls. "Can anyone make sense of this?" Vasquez asked, her voice strained. The symbols were alien, but not entirely so. There was an unmistakable familiarity to them, an almost eerie resonance. "We're still trying to get a reading," said Dr. Yen, the linguist, his fingers hovering over the holographic interface. "The translations are fragmented. Some of these glyphs don't match anything in our database." Suddenly, one of the soldiers, Sergeant Cole, staggered back, clutching his helmet as if trying to block out some invisible force. "Something's wrong," he gasped. I can hear it. It's inside my head." The rest of the team looked at him, alarm flashing across their faces. "Focus, Cole. What do you hear?" Vasquez demanded, her voice calm but firm. I don't know," he replied, his voice distant, shaky. "It's like a voice, a whisper. It's calling me." Vasquez could feel it now, too. The air seemed to hum with something ancient and wrong. The very structure of the gate seemed to pulse with energy, as though it was alive and aware of their presence. "Ignore it. Keep moving," she commanded, though her own heart raced as she moved closer to the monolithic structure. They had come too far. They couldn't afford to back down now. The crew pressed forward, moving cautiously toward the center of the gate. They stood in its shadow, gazing up at the swirling glyphs that flickered and writhed like dying stars. As they arranged themselves in the prescribed formation, the same one detailed in the ancient texts, something shifted. Vasquez's hand trembled as she activated the final sequence. The ground beneath their feet trembled as a deep, resonant hum echoed through the air. The symbols flickered violently, distorting into something unrecognizable. Then, in an instant, a soundless explosion of dark light rippled through the ruins. The sky above tore open, plunging into an abyssal void that seemed to swallow all light. The very fabric of reality seemed to warp and distort, and time itself began to twist, and then the gate opened. The air shifted, the world bent, and they stood on the threshold of something far beyond their understanding, on the edge of something that had been sealed away for eons. Whatever it was, whatever had been hidden behind the gate was now free. Chapter 2, The Fall of Xiphos 9, expanded. The first signs of disturbance came not as creatures but as something far more insidious, a convergence of concepts, twisted by an alien logic. What emerged from the abyss gate defied any categorization the human mind could comprehend. They were not merely beings in the traditional sense, but distortions, ribbons of dark energy, living anomalies that moved in and out of space and time with an unnatural fluidity. Their shapes contorted and splintered, as if they were fragments of a forgotten dimension, each one a barely. The expedition's security forces, brave and resourceful, did what they could, firing their weapons with relentless precision. But it was no use. No matter how many times they shot, no matter how many rounds they pumped into the moving shadows, the entities did not falter. They only acknowledged. The very air seemed to bend around them, like reality itself was bending under the pressure of their arrival. The soldiers' weapons malfunctioned, their power systems failing as if they were suddenly irrelevant. In their frantic attempt to fight back, they had become nothing more than impotent figures in a theater of cosmic horror. Distress signal was sent, but by the time the first wave of reinforcements could arrive, the planet had already started to collapse. Xiphos 9, once a thriving research colony, a beacon of human achievement in the far reaches of space, was slipping from reality, its fate already sealed. The ground trembled as fractures appeared in the Earth's crust, large rifts opening like mouths of hungry beasts ready to consume all that remained. Sections of the ancient ruins, which had once been the center of archaeological exploration, crumbled into the void. Towering structures sank into the abyss, disappearing without a trace, swallowed by an unseen force from below. The ground itself seemed to warp, shifting unnaturally, as though it were being pulled apart by invisible hands. Whole continents of the once beautiful planet began to unravel into nothingness. By the time Grand Admiral Lucian Varos and his fleet arrived, Xiphos 9 was no longer a planet. It was a wound in the fabric of space, a hole where reality itself seemed to bleed out. The atmosphere was twisted, unnaturally thick, and the stars above flickered in eerie disarray. The Abyss Gate, the source of all this chaos, was now a massive dark rift, spewing out strange energies, and with every second, it expanded. The horrors that had emerged were not gone. They were still there, lingering just beyond the event horizon of the gate, waiting, biding their time. The few survivors, those who had managed to escape into the remaining sections of the research station, were all broken, their minds shattered by what they had witnessed. Some muttered about them, the entities that had come from the gate, their presence a symbol of something far older, far more terrifying than any human could imagine. Others spoke of the things, shadows that moved within the gate itself, waiting to come through, to consume all. What had once been a thriving center of knowledge and exploration was now a beacon of fear and death. Grand Admiral Varos surveyed the devastation with a grim, unshaken resolve. He had seen war and death on countless worlds, but this was something else, something beyond the reach of military might. Xiphos 9 had not just fallen. It had been ripped apart, consumed by something older than the Empire itself. The gate had opened, and something ancient was seeping through. Varos knew that they could not afford to ignore this, could not hope that it would simply fade away on its own. What had emerged from the gate was not of this universe, not even of this time. It was something primordial, something far more dangerous than anything the human race had ever faced. And if left unchecked, it would spread, infecting not just Xiphos 9, but the galaxy itself. The Abyss Gate had become a conduit, a portal to an ancient terror that could unravel the very fabric of reality. It had to be stopped. But the question remained, how? Chapter 3. Descent into the Abyss. Seraph Gideon and the Black Sun Templars stood at the precipice of oblivion, staring into the yawning maw of the Abyss Gate. The rift in existence pulsed like a dying star, its tendrils of void stuff reaching outward, grasping at the very fabric of reality. The only way to stop the infection from spreading, to prevent it from consuming all they held sacred, was to step through, to face whatever horrors lurked beyond. With a silent nod, Gideon led the charge. There was no hesitation, no room for fear. The Templars were warriors of faith and fire, their oath sworn to the eternal struggle against darkness. But even the strongest hearts faltered as they stepped into the abyss. The transition was not a journey, it was an unraveling. Reality shattered around them. Time lost meaning. Consciousness fragmented into 1,000 shards, scattering into the void. Each of them felt themselves pulled apart, their souls scraped raw against the edges of something immeasurable. Memories flickered like dying embers, faces of loved ones, echoes of battle cries, the warmth of sunlight, before being swallowed by the endless dark. Then the agony ended. When they emerged, they stood upon a landscape of nightmares. The ground beneath their boots was not earth or stone, but shifting, wretched flesh, pulsating with an unnatural rhythm, as though the very world was alive and suffering. The air was thick, heavy with the stench of decay and fear. The horizon was shattered by jagged peaks that twisted into impossible shapes, towering monoliths of bone and sinew that defied logic and sanity. The sky above was a sickly shade of purple, streaked with bolts of lightning that crackled like distant, tormented screams. A shriek pierced the air, inhuman and deafening. The Templars instinctively raised their weapons, scanning their surroundings for movement. Shadows slithered at the edge of their vision, shifting through the grotesque landscape with unnatural grace. The abyss was no mere void. It was a living entity, a place where nightmares had form, where the boundaries between flesh and horror had long since collapsed. Gideon tightened his grip on his sword, its runes glowing with ethereal light. His faith was his armor, his blade an extension of his will. But even he felt the weight of this place pressing down upon him, whispering promises of despair. He turned to his warriors, their blackened armor bearing the sigil of the burning sun. Their faces, hidden behind their helmets, betrayed no weakness, but he could feel their unease. "Stand firm," Gideon commanded, his voice steady despite the corruption clawing at his soul. "This place will break us if we let it. We move forward. No hesitation, no surrender." The Templars moved in formation, their steps squelching against the abominable ground. Every breath tasted of rot and sorrow. The world shifted around them as if responding to their presence, rearranging itself with grotesque intent. Great tendrils of shadow slithered between the peaks, watching, waiting. Then the abyss spoke. A voice, deep as the void itself, reverberated through the air, vibrating in their bones. It did not speak in words but in raw emotion. Hatred, hunger, amusement. It knew them. It had been waiting. From the mists they came. Creatures of nightmare, their bodies a fusion of flesh and darkness, emerged from the shadows. Their forms were shifting, ever-changing mockeries of life, jagged teeth in the wrong places, elongated limbs ending in barbed talons, eyes that burned with malice. They moved with unnatural grace, encircling the Templars like a pack of predators, savoring the moment before the kill. Gideon raised his sword high, its radiance a defiant beacon against the abyssal gloom. "Templars, we are the light that defies the dark. We are the sword that strikes against the abyss. Hold the line." With a battle cry that shook the twisted realm, the Black Sun Templars charged into the nightmare. The first clash was an explosion, a fury and desperation. Blades met claws, armor clashed against horrors not meant for mortal eyes. The abyss screamed in rage as the warriors fought with unyielding resolve, their faith burning like a pyre in the endless dark. This was their greatest trial, and the abyss would know their wrath. Chapter 4. The Black Throne. The air itself was a living thing, thick with whispers that clawed at the mind, murmuring secrets in tongues not meant for mortal ears. Gideon and his warriors pressed forward through the undulating landscape where the very ground pulsed like the skin of some slumbering colossus. Their boots sank into flesh-like terrain, the sinew beneath shifting with unseen intent, as if the world resented their intrusion. The ruins of forgotten empires loomed around them, monuments of despair built not from stone, but from the remnants of civilizations long since consumed. Skulls, fused together in impossible architectures, formed the bridges over rivers of black fire. Walls of rib-like spires stretched toward a sky choked with swirling darkness, where nameless entities slithered through the void, their hollow eyes watching. At the heart of this blighted expanse stood the monolithic citadel, the Black Throne. A fortress of writhing sinew and cursed metal, its towering spires pulsed with an eerie, rhythmic cadence, like a heartbeat, deep and unrelenting. The very air vibrated with malevolence, distorting the light, bending perception. It was the seat of the Abyss Lords, where darkness reigned eternal. A low, guttural hum filled the space around them. The enemy had sensed their arrival. The first wave came as a ripple in the void, distortions in space that coalesced into beings of shifting forms. Some moved like liquid shadows, striking from all directions at once. Others, amorphous titans, tore free from the ground itself, their limbs reshaping into jagged weapons of obsidian and bone. And then there were those who wielded gravity as a blade, pulling warriors into spirals of oblivion, or crushing them into the earth with a mere gesture. The Templars fought as one, their weapons of celestial light carving through the horrors before them. Gideon led the charge, his blade ablaze with holy fire, cleaving through the abyssal spawn with each devastating strike. Beams of sanctified radiance erupted from the ranks, tearing through the darkness, momentarily pushing it back. Yet, for every abomination that fell, another emerged, more twisted, more relentless. The battle transcended mortal comprehension. The very fabric of existence trembled as the two forces clashed, reality warping with every exchange. Time stuttered, slowed, reversed, then surged forward in chaotic bursts. Warriors found themselves fighting battles that had yet to begin, facing wounds they had not yet suffered, and still they pressed onward. Through the storm of horrors, Gideon carved his path to the throne itself. The gates, forged from the bones of fallen titans, groaned as they parted, revealing the abyssal heart of the citadel. Within, the Abyss Lords awaited. They were not creatures in any conventional sense. They were vast, towering masses of ever-shifting darkness, their forms refusing to settle into any recognizable shape. They bent space with their presence, their mere existence a blasphemy against order. They spoke not in words but in thoughts, their voices rewriting reality itself. You cannot win. You were never meant to. The words slithered into Gideon's mind, threading through his soul like parasites. They showed him visions, worlds undone, time shattered, the inevitability of entropy. They sought to break him, to unmake his purpose. But he stood firm. Raising the final relic high, he called upon the last vestiges of divine power. A pulse of light erupted from his form, radiating outward like the toll of a celestial bell. The Abyss Lords recoiled, their forms writhing, screaming in unheard frequencies as cracks splintered across their endless darkness. The gate began to collapse. The abyss trembled, folding in on itself, consuming all within. The throne cracked. Apart, the sinew and bone unraveling as the void itself rebelled against its masters. Gideon turned, his warriors already retreating. The world behind them was collapsing into nothingness, a maw of oblivion swallowing all in its wake. With one final glance at the unraveling darkness, he stepped through the light, and the black throne was no more. Chapter 5. The return. Gideon awoke on the bridge of the Eternum, his breath ragged, his armor scorched from battle. The air around him crackled with residual energy, remnants of the rift's violent collapse. The ship's warning lights flickered, like dying stars, casting eerie shadows over the silent consoles. He pushed himself up, wincing as pain lanced through his body. His mind felt frayed, stretched thin by the horrors he had witnessed. The gate was gone, but at what cost? The stars beyond the viewport burned cold and distant, as if mourning what had transpired. The rift had sealed, but the echoes of its influence still lingered in the void. Gideon knew the wound left upon the galaxy would never truly heal. The fabric of reality had been torn open, and though they had managed to close it, the infection had already begun to spread. The Abyss Lords were not destroyed. They were merely silent, for now. And silence, he knew, was the most dangerous omen of all. A groan broke the stillness. He turned to see his surviving Templars stirring amidst the wreckage of the command deck. Their armor bore the marks of battle, deep gashes, shattered plating, burns that had seared through even the most advanced defenses. But they were alive. Gideon. A voice rasped. It was Soraya, her face pale, streaked with blood and ash. The rift, it's closed, but the abyss, he nodded grimly. Not gone, not defeated, just waiting. A deep silence settled between them. They had won, but it was a hollow victory. The horrors they had seen, the twisted Eldritch entities that had clawed their way into their universe, would never be erased. From their minds, they had glimpsed the true nature of the abyss, and that knowledge was a weight they would carry forever. Outside the viewport, the wreckage of the battle still drifted in the void. Hulking remnants of warships, shattered into lifeless debris. The great armada that had stood against the abyss was no more. 1,000 fleets had burned to seal the rift. Millions had perished. And for what? The universe would never know their names nor the price that had been paid. But Gideon knew. He and his surviving warriors would bear that burden. They had stood at the precipice of annihilation and pulled the galaxy back from the brink. And yet, the war was not over. The abyss had tasted their realm, And it would never forget. A transmission crackled to life in the silence. A broken, static-laced voice filled the bridge. "This is High Command. Eternum, respond. What is your status? The rift readings are gone, but we are detecting residual anomalies across the sector. Report." Gideon exhaled slowly. He stepped forward, gripping the console. His voice was hoarse but steady. "The gate is closed. The incursion has been stopped. But the war is far from over." A new war had begun, one not fought with fleets and armies, but with knowledge, vigilance, and a terrible, unwavering truth. The Abyss was patient, and it was still hungry. Chapter 6. The War Beyond. Though the gate was sealed, the infection had spread. Across the stars, pockets of abyssal corruption lingered in the shadows, unseen by most, but undeniable to those who had fought on the front lines. The war was not over. It had only changed shape. Gideon and his surviving Templars stood upon the bridge of the exalted spear, their war-worn faces lit by the soft glow of the star charts. A vast campaign lay before them, a final crusade to hunt down every last remnant of the Abyss before it could take root in reality once more. Each battle they had fought had left scars on their bodies, their souls, and the very fabric of the cosmos itself. But they would not waver. Not while the darkness still lurked beyond the veil of known space. Word had spread through the remnants of the Holy Dominion and the scattered free worlds. The Abyss was not fully vanquished. It had merely been wounded, its tendrils severed, but not destroyed. In the void between systems, in the forgotten relics of dead civilizations, in the whispers of the lost and the mad, there the corruption festered. And it was there that Gideon and his warriors would take the fight, through the ruins of fallen citadels, across the desolate husks of war-ravaged planets, and deep into the dying hearts of forsaken stars. The Templars pursued their quarry. They cleansed shadowed worlds where abyssal horrors had begun to stir, their holy fire purging the last remnants of darkness. Entire fleets fell beneath their righteous fury, their weapons reforged with celestial radiance to combat the unholy spawn of the void. But in the deepest reaches of the void, something watched, something ancient, something patient. It had tasted the light of the galaxy, and it did not fear it. It had been repelled, but not defeated, banished, but not slain. It had learned, adapted, and grown. Now, in the hushed silence of the black gulfs between the stars, it waited for the moment when the light would wane, when the warriors of the crusade would falter, when the embers of resistance would flicker and die. And then it would turn. Gideon knew this war would never truly end, but as long as he and his Templars drew breath, they would fight. For the galaxy, for the light, for the hope that one day the Abyss would finally be vanquished, even if that day never came. Epilogue. The waiting darkness. The stars burned cold in the void. Their light, distant and feeble, flickered against the tide of an unseen hunger. Across the galaxy, the echoes of the Black Sun Templars' crusade still lingered. Whispers of battle, fragments of worlds lost, the silent graves of warriors who had dared to stand against the Abyss. On the bridge of the Eternum, Gideon stood alone, gazing out at the Abyss beyond. The scars of the battle remained, not just upon his body but within his soul. He could feel it, a shadow that stretched across his mind, a lingering thread that tied him to the horrors they had fought. The war had not ended. It had only shifted into something else. Reports had already begun to surface. Worlds where the fabric of reality was fraying, where shadows moved with a hunger that no light could quell. There were signs, omens of something waiting, watching. The Abyss Lords had been cast back, their gates sealed, but they had not been destroyed. No force, no crusade, no relic could erase them entirely. They were eternal, and they had tasted the essence of this galaxy. Far beyond the known void, in the places where stars had never shone, something vast stirred. The Black Throne, though abandoned, still pulsed with unholy resonance. The Abyss was wounded but not defeated. It would gather its strength again, and when it did, it would return. Gideon turned from the viewport. He knew that even if every last remnant of the infection was purged, even if every dark world was scoured clean, it would not be enough. The abyss did not need a gate to reach into reality. It only needed time, and time it had in abundance. As the Eternum drifted into the dark expanse, a final whisper echoed through the void, soft, insidious, and infinite. We are patient. We are waiting. And one day, you will return to us. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed the story. Let me know in the comments what ideas you would like the next story to be about. Please leave a thumbs up, share, subscribe, comment.